I've completed every Souls game in their DLCs, so today I'm going to be ranking them from worst to best, starting with number 7, Demon Souls. Demon Souls was the first game in this Souls series and is my least favourite out of the lot, which doesn't mean it's bad by any means. I love every game on this list and it just happens to be the one with the least impact for me. I played the remake version on the PS5 and it was visually incredible, but for some reason they decided to keep the gameplay almost identical to the original, which isn't inherently a bad thing, but it could have benefited from some touch-ups as the combat is quite slow and janky. This is paired up with pretty average gimmicky bosses for the most part, excluding Flame Lurker and King Alarm. It was interesting seeing the original vision for a Souls game being level-based with only one checkpoint at the start of each level, but the only reason this design choice was even manageable is because the bosses were very easy overall. With all this said, the game still has the Souls feeling that I love, and I definitely enjoyed my time with it a lot, but I had to go a bit hard on it just to justify its last place ranking. At number 6, I have Dark Souls 2. Dark Souls 2 is definitely the most controversial game on this list, with a large portion of the Souls fanbase being very vocal on the game being bad. But I completely disagree. Obviously I acknowledge the game's flaws, which I will get into soon, but I don't think its flaws are so grand to warrant calling the game bad. Much like my complaints with Demon Souls, the gameplay is aged, janky, slow, and many of the bosses in the game are pretty average. But where this game makes up for its shortcomings is in its world, areas, art direction, and build variety. I haven't even mentioned the DLCs yet, which are all great and challenging. A lot of the issues I hear about Dark Souls 2 can be tied to its Scholar of the First Sin edition. For example, the enemy spam, which isn't present in the original game, which is the version I played. Overall, my experience with Dark Souls 2 was a great one despite all its flaws, but it does fall short compared to the following games coming up. At number 5, I have Dark Souls 1. After I finished Elden Ring, I was addicted to the Souls game formula. So I went straight to Dark Souls 1 and I was immediately hooked. This game is old, it has its jank like the previous two games, but it doesn't even matter. The world and vibe of this game enthralls you. The first half of its world is completely connected and it amazed me how a game could be designed with so much thought in this department. There's no need for fast traveling because every area is perfectly linked together and the flow between areas is perfection. The bosses in this game for the most part aren't incredible, I won't pretend they are, but some slap so hard. There's Orange Sin and Smo, Gwyn and Notorious, just to name a few. Being one of the first games in the series, it's full of so much passion and innovation. With all this praise, you may be confused to see it on the lower half of this ranking, and I've been ignoring it for long enough. The second half of this game, besides the final boss, is mid as fuck. You go through Anor Londo, which is one of the greatest areas out of any of these games, and you're filled with so much excitement for what's next. Then you get to Lost Izalith and your hopes are crushed. Every aspect of this game plummets in the second half, and it's why I couldn't place Dark Souls 1 above the games coming up. At number 4, I have Sekiro. I hated Sekiro at first. The main reason for this is I just binged all 3 Dark Souls games and came into Sekiro expecting a similar experience. But this game is so different to the rest of the series that it's barely even a Souls game. But it's a From Software title and it shares many of the elements to the Souls game, so it's close enough. After playing the game for 7 hours, it just didn't click with me, so I had a break from the Souls series for a bit. And it was only after I played Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order where I learnt to parry and I finally realised what I was missing with Sekiro. I really owe it to Fallen Order for allowing the Sekiro combat to click with me, and once it did, I couldn't stop playing. Sekiro has the best combat out of all these games without question. It's damn near a rhythm game, and while it is very challenging to get used to its combat style, once you do, this game becomes top tier. The bosses in Sekiro are a blast to fight. Even if they're kicking your ass over and over again, they never become frustrating since each attempt is so much fun. Sekiro puts more focus onto its story, compared to the other games where it's mainly lore that the player must seek out. The story isn't insanely good, but it has some great moments and I thought it was serviceable. But it's obviously not where this game shines. Sekiro is an absolute masterpiece, and it being at number 4 says a lot for the quality of this series. At number 3, I have Dark Souls 3. Dark Souls 3 is just a perfected version of the Souls formula. It's the least innovative and doesn't do much new, instead it just does everything to the highest quality. Dark Souls 3 has the strongest boss lineup in the series for me. It's just banger after banger besides a few. The combat is much faster than the other Dark Souls games and it feels so much more fluid. The art and graphics are also a major step up, and I love the area's art direction and level designs. Dark Souls 3 is really just a perfect Souls game in every regard, and I have pretty much no complaints, so let's just move on to number 2, which is Bloodborne. Bloodborne is the most recent game I have played besides the Elden Ring DLC, and I was worried that it may not live up to the hype. I felt like it may have been a lot of people's first Souls game and it wasn't going to have the same impact for me after playing every other game in the series. But I'm glad to say that this game met every bit of hype it received. Bloodborne is absolutely beautiful and has my favourite style and setting in the series. The dark gothic style makes this game extremely unique and special. The bosses are solid and has some of my favourites in the series. The DLC is spectacular and probably the best out of the series. I do prefer the bosses in Dark Souls 3, which is why it's hard to know which one I like more, but literally everything else in Bloodborne is better, so I think it deserves a number 2 spot. At number 1, I have Elden Ring. There's not much more I can add on to the praise that Elden Ring's already received, and I'm sure you've heard about the game's brilliance a million times already, but it really is that special. This was the first game I played in the series, and it's what led me to start loving games again and eventually starting this channel. While spots 4 to 2 were extremely hard to decipher which order they should be in, number 1 was the easiest choice to make. Elden Ring, much like Dark Souls 3, is the Souls formula perfected, but this time it's taken to a much grander scale in its open world. The open world is a delight to explore and is filled with content. You never know what you're about to stumble upon next, and while many times it can be another cave or catacomb, it could also be a different world underground with breathtaking visuals. The game is so dense and filled with things to do, and is the first game to truly capture the image Breath of the Wild's open world created. The remembrance bosses in Elden Ring are many of the strongest in the whole series. Each fight is extremely memorable and exciting thanks to the detailed movesets, boss design, and arenas. On top of all that, we now have a 30+ hour challenging and incredible DLC, like the base game wasn't already enough to solidify Elden Ring's spot as one of, if not the greatest game ever made. Well, that was my ranking. Let me know if you agree or disagree with these positions. I'd love to hear how you'd rank the games, as everyone's list is going to look pretty different.